What if fear that comes up for you isn't a stop sign, but information that you can actually use? Feedback. In this conversation with my friend and coaching colleague, James, we take a look at some of the fears that maybe have been lingering around since the pandemic and anxiety loops and some of the physical manifestations of stress and anxiety like tight chest and brain fog and headaches. Also, the stories about failure or not being that person. You'll hear some practical ways to work with it. Reframing nerves as usable energy, taking small, safe steps, and choosing an environment that helps rather than hinders, and some simple ways to steady yourself when your body is on high alert. Now, between us, we've had to navigate this journey personally and with clients, and no theory for theory's sake here, really just what's helped us out and what we hope will also help you. So here's the chat James and I had about fear and how to deal with it. Welcome to Present Influence, the show for speakers, coaches, and expert business owners who care about communicating with integrity, not fakery. You want to stand out without selling out, connect authentically, and influence without the ick. I'm John Ball, keynote coach and professional speaker, here to help you cut the fluff, sharpen your message, and show up with confidence, clarity, and real charisma. You can expect smart conversations, honest insights, and some laughs along the way, because if you're not enjoying it, why are you doing it? Felt like after last time's conversation went so well, we thought we'd come back again and this time have a bit of a conversation about fear. And this is something I've noticed coming up for me. Maybe you experience this as well, James, with a number of clients on calls, maybe and personally as well. You know, I think there's nobody who doesn't have to deal with the fear aspects of going forward with stuff, right?
Yep. I mean, for me, I've had a lot of dealings with fear and anxiety for the last 3 or 4 years. It's just all come up, and I have clients who are going through, uncertainty, fear. How do you manage that stuff? It's scary when it comes up. So I'm actually quite an expert on fear because it's just been it's tried to run my life, but especially after the times of COVID. I don't know why, but now I've kind of I see it more for what it is. But we'll talk more about that.
I think that's potentially a really valid place to start, because I think, we all had that experience of lockdowns and COVID, and it changed a lot of things for us. And whilst everything pretty much did come back, and there was a lot of fear about, are we ever going to be able to hug again? Are we ever going to be able to shake hands again? There was a lot of fear come out. Are we ever going to have normal meetings again? Or are we ever going to be speaking in public again? All those kinds of things.
Is the virus going to kill me?
Right. Is it going to come back worse? Are we actually going to be able to go to it?
Yeah.
And then there was also, I think for a lot of people, there were these to be fears of, after being shut away, of coming back to everything. Like I experienced this particular one of the city where I live was so quiet, and it's not normally quiet. Valencia is not usually a quiet city, and it was quiet during all those times, and I kind of got used to it, and even when we started being allowed out to go and have walks at certain times and all that sort of stuff, it was still quiet. And so, I was, because I had a private office, I was able to still go out to my office, and the city was empty, it's hardly anyone around. And it just felt so different. When everyone started coming back, it was a big shock to the system. And definitely, maybe I think there's even some fear around that as well, of this is a huge change and I'm not even sure how I feel about it. And so I think all these shocks to the system, all these fears, the uncertainty is often what's behind a lot of that, but also what we get used to, what we get comfortable with. We start to have resistance to that or to losing it. I think for a lot of people, fear really comes from this place of losing something, because we generally are far more afraid of what we're potentially going to lose than anything else. Would you agree?
Yeah. The fear of loss. For the pandemic, the fears brought the fear. I don't know what it was. It brought up old fear of my early years as a kid, but it was a trigger. It was a trigger response, which I never, ever imagined. And I guess what fear is anticipation or confrontation for the brain. The fear is trying to keep you safe. but it's a bit outdated because 95% of the fears that we generate in our minds don't really exist, but they exist in here.
Right.
They exist in here. All right, some of it is useful. If I cross the road as a bus coming, well, I better be careful not to cross the road too quick because I'll get hit by the bus. But a lot of that is manufactured, and I know from my own experience how I manufactured so much fear, and a lot of it was stemming from programs as a kid that were coming back to haunt me, as it were.
Yeah.
But it's an
There
opportunity
is.
to clear up your act. It's also an opportunity to clear that stuff up and let it go. And it's not easy.
Yeah, ostensibly there is a genetic aspect to this, and to which we should probably be thankful to our ancestors, because if they hadn't had such honed fear responses, they wouldn't have survived to have bred and for us to be here today. So, you know, the ancestors with well, probably not ancestors really, but the ancient peoples with the lowered fear response or with the faulty fear response probably didn't survive because there was daily physical danger. You know, your life would be in danger on a regular basis in those times where things were a lot more survival based, perhaps. And so, you know, the thing is, we don't need that level of fear now generally in modern life, but our brains have yet to evolve past it. And whilst I think maybe there is some progress there, we still have a much higher fear response, a much higher negative focus aspect in our brains, which historically has been very helpful to survival, but now potentially impacts and interferes with survival and success, particularly in going forward, because we often end up not taking the action or backing away or hiding away in an attempt to feel safe.
Yeah. And so that then becomes your paradigm, and you end up thinking, I'd rather be safe and quiet and hide away, because if I try and break out, I'm going to feel scared and unsafe. That's it. A lot of it from my experience was that suddenly I associated safety with danger. If I'm safe, if I relax too much, something bad's going to happen, says the mind.
Right.
Again, it's the brain linking beliefs, and it's happening at lightning speed. But you know, rationally, I think, well, I'm safe. There's something wrong. No one's going to come and beat me up or whatever. It's fine. But we're talking about irrational stuff.
We are, and I think some of the danger with this, and certainly I've had personal experiences, I think probably we all have, we end up thinking it's something wrong with us, or we end up thinking that we're weak or we're broken or whatever it is. But the reality is we're not. We're just normal human beings who have the same issues as everyone else, but maybe don't have the mechanisms or responses or the way forward. We haven't got a guide for the way forward as to how do we move out of this, because I think ultimately you want to keep yourself safe. It's a very natural human response. But what ends up happening a lot of the time is that you also end up then feeling frustrated and limited, and that you're not really living your life as fully as you could be. And that's a problem. That really, to me, that's the bigger problem for me, of people not being able to properly do the sort of personal development, or not be able to self-actualize and to raise themselves up the ladder of self-actualization to become more than they are right now. Because without that ability to progress, without that ability to move forward with things that would bring more fulfillment in our lives, we're going to feel empty. We're going to feel limited, undoubtedly.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there comes a point where you say, I'm going to stop feeling afraid, even though I'm feeling shit scared at the moment about things. You reach a point where it's deep down, you think enough is enough. So sometimes you need to reach a decision point. So I'm done with this. I'm still feeling scared. And also admit that if you're scared, you're scared. If you're afraid, you're afraid.
Yeah.
It's life. It's just a thought. To me, it's a feeling, but it's also a thought. So really what fear is lots of thoughts or fear being translated into feelings, and you have these body sensations. You mentioned about having a headache the other week and so on, me as well, pressure in the head, tightness in the chest. I mean, the body's very clever because it's just giving you feedback as the way you're thinking. There's nothing wrong about that. It's just that the body doesn't lie. The thoughts lie. Our thinking lies. As you said, there's nothing wrong with us.
Yeah.
And one issue about the personal development industry, you and I have been in it for years, is there is a belief that there is something wrong with me and I'm flawed. Really, deep down, it's a bit like the wave in the ocean. You're the ocean, but you think you're the wave, right? And there's something wrong with the wave. No, you're actually the ocean, but we don't see it. We're too caught up with, I am the wave. Well, actually, the wave and the ocean's part of the same thing. But when you really see it, that there is actually nothing wrong with you or me, and all it is our imagination, our thoughts, and our beliefs. That's the thing that needs to be looked at and let go of.
Yeah, I definitely have never liked the idea that we might be broken or, as you say, less than, or we need to let go of those old ideas that there's something wrong with us. We generally know when there is, we know because it's something that we probably would need specialized help to resolve if there is something that wrong with us. But I think because we have these physical responses to stuff, it feels very, very real. And you bring up something really, really valid, really important about our brains are always checking in on our emotions, being guided by our physical feelings and responses. And so a lot of how we feel, a lot of our emotional state is dependent on how our brain is interpreting what's going on in our body, the feelings that are coming up. And this is particularly relevant because one of the things that was definitely, I think, was holding me back and ended up being a big personal breakthrough for me was when I first started learning to do public speaking, when I first started learning to get on a stage and speak to people, because that's scary. And most people will say, it's often listed as one of people's biggest fears is public speaking. And certainly I had fear around it. But when I actually started doing it, one of the reframes that comes up that I still use, I use it with my clients because it is such a valuable reframe. It is a reframe on the interpretation of your body signals, because the feeling of nerves before going up on stage to speak is pretty much the same as the feeling of excitement. They are almost indistinguishable. And so reframing that nervous feeling to a feeling of excitement allowed me to go and do say, all right, I'm excited. And I think that really sparked this passion for speaking as well, which I think it does happen for a lot of people who have this reframe of saying, all right, but your body's giving these responses, but how you can choose how you're going to interpret them. And that's really powerful to know you can redefine, you can reframe your own brain's interpretation of its bodily signals in certain situations that you would have interpreted previously as a massive fear response, the kind of fear response that I've seen has people sometimes running away from a stage in tears because they just can't do it. Because they haven't been able to reframe this as excitement rather than fear.
Sometimes like that, when I'm speaking within group coaching, remember when I first started, I was quite scared about in front of all these people in group coaching, but I just thought, wow, what a growth opportunity. This is the reframe. My mind says, no, you're not up for it. You're not good enough. Who's going to listen to you? Blah, 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 all that story. But in spite of that, I thought, wow, this is an opportunity, because the more fear I feel, the more we're talking about the burn. I'm in the burn right now. It's like going to the gym. Wow, more fear. That means there's an opportunity to garner a bit more power in myself. Don't like it. But as you say, getting up on stage, speaking to all these people, it's a scary thing.
Yeah. People often talk about fear of success and fear of failure. This is generally the terms in which I hear my clients frame this. Maybe you've heard that as well from clients, but usually it's those two. I have fear of failure. I have fear of success. I think they're the wrong frames. I don't think that's actually what they're afraid of. I think fear of failure is fear of loss. It's fear of loss of status as much as anything else. And fear of success is a kind of loss as well, because it's a loss of your current identity to have to shift into something that you have uncertainty about right now, which is a version of you that you don't know that you can be just yet. And that's the real fear, is like the fear of making that kind of shift and the loss of who you are or where you are right now. And to some degree, the loss of the loss of certainty, as much as we can ever have that in our lives. Our brains like to be able to predict what's coming next. We know more or less day to day what we're going to be facing. We know more or less what kind of experiences we're going to be having day to day. And when things take us out of what is easily predictable, we get taken out of that sense of security, that sense of well-being, a comfort, if you like. We can call it the comfort zone, because it kind of is. And we get placed into uncertainty. And that's where we have the threats of loss, the threats of change, the threats of things going beyond what we're comfortable with or what we can competently or confidently deal with. And the fear kicks in. That's my frame on it. Would you agree with that? Or is there anything you'd add?
Yeah, you mentioned about identity. You know, if you're looking to get to the next level, whether it's your health, your business, whatever, in a way, you've got to let go of an old identity. And identity is a story, but it's so convincing. Who the hell am I going to be without my story? It's a scary prospect for the brain, because you don't know what. It's a bit like going from a caterpillar to a butterfly. The caterpillar has no idea what a butterfly looks like. And so it goes through this tremendous process of metamorphosis and so on in the cocoon, and then it comes out. But our brains want to keep us in the comfort zone. But the thing is, the growth happens outside the comfort zone. And that's one big thing in the personal development world we learned. But if you think you're going to grow and you want guarantees and you want everything to be safe, well, you ain't going to grow.
Yeah, exactly. And we are not the first people to be thinking about this. There's no doubt about that. And it does remind me of that. It's really, I think it's kind of an ancient sort of phrase, if you like, or what do you call it, parable of, the idea of you can't step into the same river twice, because you are not the same person, and the river isn't the same river. It's not the same water. That is life. So is the saying, they're like, well, you don't want to change, but you will, because change is inevitable. You don't really want to be the same person next week as you are this week, because you grow, you learn new things, you develop. We are not the same person we were yesterday or last week or last month or last year, and on and on. We develop, we change. This whole idea of like this concept of like personality being fixed or permanent isn't true. Because we do change. We can sometimes change massively. We can have really massive shifts that could change our own and other people's ideas, concepts of who we are, potentially. And that can be for good and for bad, obviously, but it can go in both directions. But the change, the potential is there. But we're often so locked in this story, and it is just a story, as you say, of who we are. That gives us comfort. That often we'll stay there because we can confidently say, oh, this is who I am, this is how I feel comfortable. And without having to challenge ourselves, without having to feel that we have to grow and develop. But it will. Change will happen whether you resist it or not. But the thing is, if you don't do this, or you don't go with it, if you do resist it, really the way that you're going to go is stagnation. Trying to stay where you are will result in stagnation. It will result in that kind of slow death, if you like. Or
stagnation, and then you feel unhappy, and then you get depressed, then you're in a rut, then you procrastinate, and then it's like a momentum. The momentum either goes that way or it goes that way.
Right.
The law of momentum.
What happens to water when it can't flow? It becomes stagnant.
And it, awful. It smells.
It smells bad. All sorts of horrible things. It's a good metaphor for us when we are, well, we maybe made a lot of us made out of water, but we don't want to become stagnant in our lives. And I think many of us have that experience in trying to stay safe, trying to stay comfortable. That really is it. So it is, to me, the choice becomes very real. Like I got to a point in my life years ago, before I ever got into personal development, where I recognized that I felt like I was more of a passive observer of life than an active participant. And I made the choice that I wasn't happy about that I felt like I really wanted and needed to be an active participant in my own life. And that decision changed so much for me. Like the world shifted just on that one decision for me, and things were never the same after that. So once you have expanded, you can't go back to where you were before. You know, the whole shape of who you are changes, and you can't go back to where you were. And so we have to be expanded. But the question pins down to this of, how do you want to experience your life? Do you want to experience your life feeling safe and shut off from everything and trying to stay at the same level you are right now? Or do you actually want to have growth, but you're just not sure that you can achieve it, or you might fail, or things could go wrong? But you want to have those things. Yeah, sure, it'd be nice, but I'm not sure it's for me. I'm not sure I'm up for it, or I can do it. You know,
or if I try something, I'm going to become disappointed, so I don't do anything, and therefore I'm safe. Or
and potentially,
and again, that's the mind, the ego's keeping you in a small universe. When we're much bigger than that. I mean, every one of us we're huge, but we just don't have a sense of that. We are, as I say, it's a bit like we are the ocean, not the wave. We're both, but we've forgotten we're the ocean, this vast ocean. Or we're another metaphor. We're the sky, and then there's the clouds. The clouds are the thoughts, but we're this huge sky, but we've forgotten we're the sky.
How many times have you heard from clients that they've tried it before and failed? Hey, they said, "I want to do this, but I tried before and I failed." And like, well, did you try again? Did you keep trying? Because failure doesn't mean you're not going to get there. Failure means you tried something that didn't work. Now, that maybe it didn't work because you didn't put enough effort in, or maybe it didn't work because it wasn't the right time, or you weren't doing the right things, or you didn't have the right guidance or mentorship. There could be a million reasons why it didn't work. But why should that mean that you don't try again? Why does that mean that you don't go for it again?
When kids learn to walk, don't they fall down about, I don't know, 100 times before they start walking? They don't think about it. They stand up, walk down, stand up. But what happens is that we've got all these programs and all these stories and think, no, I tried it. I tried starting this business and it failed. I must be no good at it. It runs in the family. My friends also tell me, what my hell am I doing trying to do this? Right. All these things. And so, they're probably right, because I failed, and they proved to me that I'm not a success. And other people say, no, I'm going to try again. At the end of the day, you try shit out. You keep trying and trying and trying until you get your own little formula. Everyone's got their own little formula for success.
I'm not saying that there aren't times where you have a big fall and something doesn't go right, and you maybe need a little time to recover yourself. Sure. I think we've all been there. You have to give yourself some grace there. But you absolutely demonstrate there how easy it is to buy into and reinforce these stories we create about ourselves, because they feel so real. They feel so real, but they are just stories in our head, and they don't have to stay that way. But sure, maybe you'll try again and maybe you'll fail again. But that's life, right? Yeah. That's life. What do you do? As you say, does the child fall down a few times and say, "Oh, that's it. I'm never going to be a walker. I'm just going to stay down here and crawl on the ground.
We're going to stay down there for the rest of my life." Right. I mean, no. I heard once, there's no such thing as failure, just feedback. Feedback. Okay, this business, I tried this. The feedback is I was in the wrong market. I didn't understand the market dynamics, whatever the product was too expensive. Just feedback.
And it is, and it's very hard to think about it. But here's the thing, like, feedback sounds like it should be this dispassionate thing, something that we're not personally connected to. Feedback is very personal. It really is. It is personal, and it should be personal. And you should take it personally as much as we say. Don't take feedback personally. You don't take it personally, because you need to grow from it. You need to develop from it. If you don't take it personally, I think you're not taking it seriously. You have to take it personally, but not to the point where you need to be upset or deal with. If emotions come up for you, deal with it. Get through it. You'll get to the other side of it. But if it gets to the point where you say, you take it so personally that you get to a point where you don't feel that you can hear feedback again from somebody else, then okay, you you maybe need to take a step back from taking stuff personally. But there's lessons here for you that you need to personally apply to your life. And that's why I say take it personally. Take it personally as in care about it. Take it personally as in be hungry for the feedback that people can give you or that life can give you. But keep going, because this whole idea that failure means that everything has gone to hell and there's no way forward is false. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's just a stop you make on the journey. And sometimes we make that stop more times than we care to, but it's a stop we make on the journey to greater success. And sure, you may well go through life. It could happen that you go through life never really hitting the success you want to, but would you want to get to the end of your life knowing that you'd at least tried, or thinking, looking back, and
gave it a go, didn't work out,
you gave up?
Okay, but I am not. It's not. I am a failure. That's just okay. I failed here, I failed there, I succeeded there, I succeeded there. But ultimately, we didn't come here as failures,
right? And so if that's become your identity,
but we become an identity. You talked about limiter loops. We talked about it the other day and stuff like that. So these loops keep going on. I'm a failure. I'm a failure. The other thing you mentioned about getting feedback from people, that's good. As long as the people are supportive. What you don't want is to have a friend of yours is complaining all the time and says, and you say, well, I had this business and it didn't work. You see, I told you so. Yeah. So rather than, I mean, that's why we do coaching, is like we support people, and I'll say go find a coach if you want to find. If not, find a supportive friend who's going to listen to you and give you, constructive feedback.
Yeah. Look, you don't want business advice from Barry down the pub after he's had a few pints, it's not going to help you. You want feedback from the right places and from the right people, from environments but it still needs to be feedback that's going to be useful. But I still think most feedback can be useful if you apply the right frames to it, even from potentially negative sources, because it can help to give you that resolve. Now, I think if you do find yourself completely surrounded by people who don't get you or don't get what you're trying to do or don't support you in any way, then you do need to start finding some people that you can have in your life, or some groups where you can at least spend some time with people who are more positive, more encouraging, maybe a bit further ahead in the game than you are right now, so that they can help to pull you up. Because if you don't have that in your life, you need that. We all need that. Our environment, as our friend Hal says, your environment is stronger than willpower.
Exactly.
So what you surround yourself with will influence your outcomes.
Yeah. Now you mentioned something because you do speaking on the stage, and you mentioned about how a particular speaking association where you live have a particular view, and then you spoke to somebody else who had a much wider perspective. Right. So who you hang out with is who you become. And she was much more wider view. Rather than this limited perception about what you can do in terms of making money as a speaker.
And I had bought into this whole thing of, right, well, they're in this big speaking organization. They must know what they're talking about. And they don't know anyone who's at the level that I would want to get to as a speaker who's outside of the US. And then I speak to this old lady who's like, oh no, those speakers do exist. They are real. And I needed to hear that. I needed to know that that's real. And she said, they're probably just not in that organization or not very active in it. And so those people don't know who they are. But so we buy into these stories. That was just a story, but it seemed very real. And I was hearing from sources who I assumed had knowledge and understanding beyond mine that must be the case. And then it turns out, maybe not. Maybe that's that. Well, not maybe. It's actually not the case. And that limitation ends up becoming self-imposed without us even realizing it. It's so easy. Exactly. So easy to buy into these things, and the environment, who you spend time with, who you talk to, really does matter.
Yeah. So, and if you have a fear, so it's important to hang out with the right kind of people, supportive feedback, the right kind of feedback. If you have a fear, let's just say that, I'm a failure because I tried this and it didn't work, so I must be a failure. Ask yourself the question, is that true? It might just stop the mind from giving you this loop you're talking about. It may not, but No, I'm not a failure because I failed. Succeeded this and that. And I succeeded in keeping myself fit. I've succeeded in having a great marriage. No, I'm not a failure. But I failed starting up my website and doing this business. But it's not true that I am a failure.
But that is your whole identity.
Yeah, because I think,
if you then go on and ask yourself, is it possible that isn't true? Or can I find examples in my life where I have not been a failure? Yeah, you will find those. Nobody's going through their life failing at absolutely everything they do because they're not still here. They failed at everything. So they failed in survival. Maybe that's one of the few things you can find that you haven't failed at. You're still here. You're still going. You haven't failed, but we can all find examples in our life where we haven't failed. But it's like, well, what would you want to be true? What would you want the story to be? And then can you start doing something to move yourself towards that? Because one of the conversation we were having before we go, and this is really about how fear can feel so physically real. And with all this talk about this, how we associate it with our body, the fear responses can come up with stress, but stress can manifest itself in multiple ways that feel very real. So it was talking about the headaches. So I was getting brain fog last week.
Nausea, bowel movements, tunnel vision, sweaty palms. This is just the body registering that you've got lots of fear thinking right now.
Right. But you can feel like there's something physically wrong with you. We were both saying that. You thought there was something wrong with you. I thought maybe I needed an MRI or something last week because my head was such a mess last week. And it was just this fear response that was coming up and I couldn't fully control it. But this time I recognized it. Whereas I think previously I just thought it was something going on. Headaches coming up or overload, mental overload. Didn't really recognize it for what it was, but ultimately that was the thing. Yeah. So, fear,
you mentioned action, by the way. If you don't act, then the fear is just going to keep you in a little bubble, right? So I talked about how I did a list of all my fears, and I start with the small ones. Like when I was in London, I had a real kind of like anxiety about going in the London Underground, the metro, especially in busy times. And my mind says, no, I don't feel like doing it. So I did it. It was a small fear, but it was palpable inside me. And I did it for a few days. And then suddenly I thought, well, I can do this. Or you might have fear of spiders. Well, be in the room with a spider. Try, edge into it. Take action. There was a book written years ago called The Magic of Thinking Big. And he said, action cures fear. Yeah. Well, when you do something about the fear starts reducing. But the other thing is, fear will always be with me as long as I continue to grow.
Yeah.
So the more you grow, the more fear will come around to try and stop you and say, no, that's not who you are.
Yeah. 100% I agree that action is the cure for fear, but it's not always having to be, there doesn't always have to be massive sweeping action because that becomes even more scary sometimes. But action, I used to follow a guy called Dan Millman. Is like you may have heard of him, is it the Peaceful Warrior guy? Yeah. But, and so I went to see him speak in London one time. Super nice guy. And one of the things that he says in some of his talks is about sometimes the action you take is just going for a walk or cleaning the house or something, just so you're taking some action. So it's not always direct action to the thing that you're doing, but just getting into an action habit. But it needs to build up to becoming more direct and more directed to what you want to move forward with in life. But sometimes we just need to get ourselves doing something. So if you're in a bit of a slump or feeling the lethargy or shutting yourself off because you're feeling the failure and feeling the world is like been closing in on you, getting out for a walk in itself can feel like an achievement, is doing something, but it's not so confronting. It's
you're sitting there and get what's going on. All this, you're in your head, lots of noise in the head. Yeah. And then, of course, you don't do anything. As you say, break the pattern. Go for a walk, go to the gym, cook a nice meal for your partner, whatever. Stand on one leg, something that's going to just change the energy.
Yeah, and we can definitely do that. But the fear response, although it can can feel very real, and it is ultimately coming up to protect us. It doesn't have to define us. In fact, it shouldn't define us. And hopefully, hopefully just what we've been talking about today is enough to help people realize or start to recognize that it's not your whole identity, or failure isn't your identity, and nothing is your complete identity. We are a myriad of things all in one, but we can start to shift and change that. And maybe we need to start shifting and changing our environment as part of that journey to achieving that. But certainly directing ourselves, or having the awareness around this. If you've got some kind of awareness from what we've talked about today, you have the ability to start to make some change, because awareness is that first step. Now you do need to take action with that awareness.
That's it. And sometimes we need support. I mean, sometimes we are so scared, we need some support around us. Sometimes doing it alone is hard. So sometimes you need a supportive friend or whatever to help you through. And start small. If you've got a big fear about something, let's say a big fear is speaking on the stage. I mean, it's massive. We'll start with speaking in front of the mirror, then speak to your partner. Then
I generally don't recommend speaking in front of the mirror. But
whatever, something that is going to move you in the direction of being on the stage. But don't just go onto the stage, because it might be just too overwhelming. But edge into it.
I'd say go to a Toastmasters club. You don't have to get
things like that.
You don't have to get up on stage and speak. You don't have to do anything, but you just go and watch and speak to some people, and you've taken a step in a particular direction. But even that could feel like a big challenge to things. But if you are needing help dealing with the uncertainty, or you've been through some emotional trauma, or this feels very real for you, James is a coach who specializes in this stuff. So you might want to reach out and get in touch and get some coaching on this. Or if you're looking for a breakthrough as a speaker, or we want to get on stages or push through in that kind of way, then I can help you with that. So you can reach out to either of us for help and support if that's going to help you, and I'll put some details in the show notes in the description for you if you want to get in touch with either of us. But our main hope in having this conversation isn't to try and get clients, it's to try and say, can this help somebody to at least have a bit of awareness and potentially make a shift and recognize what's really going on for them in their lives, and say, right, I'm not going to sit here or just be in this. I'm going to make some change. I'm going to do something that's going to make my life better than it is currently. And that's what we hope comes from this conversation.
Yeah, the thing is, if people want to make comments, maybe, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I calm myself down? How do I emotionally regulate? We haven't got time in this podcast to talk about that. We may talk about it. It depends, but there are approaches that one has to take to actually emotionally regulate as you're going through this storm in the head.
Yeah, 100%, and stuff that and so we've got it all figured out ourselves. We've just been through stuff and come out the other side, and we've helped other people navigate this stuff as well. It's things we still have to deal with ourselves. Stuff doesn't go away, but we just get better at dealing with it, hopefully.
That's it. Johnny, it was great. Good talk.
Awesome. Yeah, great stuff. Thank you, James. We'll come back again, no doubt, and have another deep dive conversation, but this has been fun. Thank you. So if this chat today landed for you, do one small thing before the day ends. Maybe take a walk, message a supportive friend, book yourself in for a Toastmasters meeting, and maybe go along without even speaking, or I'll say hello to some people. Be nice at least. You could swap one unhelpful voice in your feed for a useful one. There's always the option to just do nothing. But really all that will do for you is keep the loop alive and keep you stuck in the same old cycles. But even small actions can start to loosen it. So if you want support, James helps people regulate and move through uncertainty, and I help speakers and leaders perform under pressure. You can find details to contact either of us in the show notes. Subscribe to the show and maybe share with us one step that you're taking to move forward. Have an amazing week. See you next time.